Hi, and welcome back to this Tuesday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk, the American Family Radio Talk Network. The program is Focal Point. My name is Brian Fisher. You are aboard the USS Focal Point, our patrol boat in which we patrol the choppy waters of America's public life, looking without pause for the coordinates where truth intersects with politics. Our commander is on the bridge. The scriptures are nautical charts. The Holy Spirit, our navigator, and I serve as your loyal, humble, and cheerful first mate. Honored and delighted to welcome to our decision maker line Sandy Rios, a colleague of mine here at American Family Radio Talk Network. Many of you catch your program, Sandy Rios, in the morning right here on AFR Talk every day, Monday through Friday, 7 to 8 p.m. Or a.m., 7 to 8 a.m. Central. Sandy, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thank you, Brian. It's nice to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you with us. Great to have you back from Israel. And I had a couple of things I wanted to chat with you about. First of all, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about your trip to Israel. I know you're going to be covering this, have covered it, will be covering it on your program in the morning. But I'm particularly interested in a couple of things. So I'll just throw a couple of things out and let you kind of grab whichever one you want or all of them and run with it. I know that you talk to people in the IDF, that's the Israeli Defense Forces. I'm very curious to get your read on how they are feeling about Israel's position militarily right now. Do they feel that they're in a position where they can defend themselves? Do you sense any sense on their part that some kind of an attack on Iran or their nuclear facilities is coming? What about the deal with Syria? How are they feeling about that? And then related to that, from your conversation with them and with politicians in Israel, how do they feel about the level of support that Israel is getting from this president and this administration? So grab the ball and go.
All right. Okay. Easy. No, not easy. Well, let me start with the last question first, Brian, because that was obviously a topic which I wanted to jump into. And let me explain that we had multiple meetings with Israeli Defense Forces. We met with the Flying Camels. We met with the man who designed the Iron Dome. We met with just countless people who are experts on Palestine. We met with a New York Times bureau chief. We met with a Palestinian journalist. So we've had tons of information, morning, noon, and night. So the question you asked me is a question that I often ask also. Was their impressions or in subtle and not so subtle ways, how they felt about this administration? So here's the answer. Let me just say that we heard rave reviews about the president's last visit to Israel, how he said just the right thing, and how moving it was to the Israeli people, and how now President Obama is going up in polls. Well, because I know the president's records, and I know about his past affiliations, not the least of which was Rashid Khalidi, who was a member of the PLO, who was a professor at the University of Chicago and his best friend in Chicago. And because we know so much about him here in regard to his past, it really bothered me that they would even indicate for a minute that they were considering that this president could possibly be their friend.
You know, and I wonder,
my take on it.
I wonder, Sandy, you go back, it sounds to me a little bit like 2008, where, you know, we've had now 4 or 5 years to listen to Obama, to be around him, not only to hear his words, but see him in action. We're way past being dazzled by his rhetoric any longer. I mean, not that many of us were to begin with, but, you know, a lot of the American people are just past the point where they're dazzled by his rhetoric now. They can't be fooled by him anymore. But I wonder if maybe the Israeli people, because they've had less exposure to him, they're still in the position where the proverbial wool can be pulled over their eyes, and maybe that's what's happening over there.
Well, I think there's no doubt that's true, but the cycle with them has been this. I mean, when he was running for office, they loved him. They were just like the rest of the world. The Israelis were very high on Barack Obama. I was over there when he was running for election, I guess 2007. But after he became president and they saw how he treated Bibi Netanyahu and how he disregarded Israel and did not come and how he began to sort of favor the Muslim world, his popularity in the polls just plummeted. And that's where it's remained for these several years he's been in office. But this is what I think, Brian, for what it's worth, just a feeling on my part. But I think the Israeli people have been so desperate for encouragement. They've been living under such incredible pressure. And then the fact that, and this is a fact, that they do not sense support from this president in this increasingly intense situation with primarily Iran and their nuclear weapon capability has just sent them into despair. Now, and I actually think this is a function of desperation for anything to cling to. That's my diagnosis. I don't think that the military, and I don't think that Netanyahu, and in fact I have good reason to believe that Netanyahu is not confused or dissuaded, but it's part of a political reality that he has to, go about the business of trying to curry favor with the American president. I mean, America is their lifeline. Who else supports them in the world? No one. And so the reality that this president might not be a supporter and might even be a horror of all horrors, to some degree an enemy of theirs, is just too horrible for them to even contemplate.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Sandy. Obviously, you got, like you say, Israel is all alone in that part of the world. They're the only democracy. They're the only reliable ally that we have in the Middle East. We have all sorts of reasons, biblically as well as politically, to be friends of Israel, to support Israel, to stand with Israel, to be an ally to Israel. And you and I have looked at this president, and I believe there's a pretty dark strain of anti-Semitism that's kind of in the heart of this president, and it expresses itself every once in a while. And so you got to wonder, if the chips are down and Israel does come under attack from Iran or from some jihadist groups coming across the border from Syria, you got to wonder how much help they're going to get from this president. What do you think would happen? How do you think this president would respond if Israel was, in fact, attacked by its enemies?
Well, if it happened today, I think he would go about the business of pretending that he was helping, and he might do some level of support. But if it happened after the midterm elections coming up, and the left wins the House of Representatives, then I don't think there's any assurance. I don't think there's any assurance that he would help. I think he probably would likely pretend to help, but the reality is I'm pretty hawkish on this in terms of my opinion about what he intends for Israel. Seems pretty clear to me.
Now let me ask you.
I think the rest of it's just posturing.
Now let me ask you about Syria, which is just across the border from Israel. They actually share a border, Golan Heights and all that. Let me ask you about Syria. This is changing gears a little bit, but our president's planning to give them arms and resources to the rebel groups, and we know now that there are 9 rebel groups involved, very loose coalition here. 7 of them are Islamists. They are jihadists in orientation. They're Muslim Brotherhood type groups. They are linked with Al-Qaeda type groups. And you and I haven't talked about this, but it seems to me it's just foolish for us to be arming anybody in that conflict, because there is no good guy in the Syrian civil war.
So are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking your opinion. What do you think about us helping Syria?
Well, I've given this a lot of thought, Brian, and actually in a conversation with a listener that I had yesterday, sort of a light bulb went on. And again, this is my analysis, take it or leave it. But I've wondered, it's hard to know. It's not clear. It's not clear to the Israelis after spending a lot of time with them. They're not clear about what the outcome should be. I think they are pretty unified in thinking Bashar Assad should be gone, but they also are not clear on what might happen after that. So there's no clarity in the world on this issue, for good reason. But still, one wonders, where does the president, what is he thinking? And this is what I think he's thinking. First of all, we know that he was strongly influenced. Now, whether he has embraced this or not, I don't know, but he was strongly influenced by communism under the Russian regime. His dad was a Marxist. His mentor was Frank Marshall Davis, a Marxist. He has associated in college and university, these are all documentable, that he cut his teeth on Marxism. Whether he embraced it or not, it seems like his policies certainly do line up with that. But the other part is, the thing further to that is that it's not just Marxism. It was his mom and dad met in Russian class. And it was the Soviet Marxism that was very popular and embraced by, romanticized really, by people on the left of his parents' generation and Frank Marshall Davis. I have no doubt that Barack Obama grew up hearing the praises of the great Soviet Union. You know, the left always conveniently forgot how brutal they were, but they romanced the communist system. Okay, so secondly, though, he was also raised with a romance for Islam. And remember when he was doing the interview with Nicholas Kristof and he recited the Islamic call to prayer in perfect Arabic and said it was the most beautiful sound in the evening. And we know about his policies. We know his first foreign speech was to the Muslim world, and we also know then about his policies. We have seen what he has done. We've seen how he's advanced the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. We've seen that his best friend in the world of, leaders is Erdogan from Turkey, who is an Islamist. So if you single out his favorite people, they, in the Islamic world, they're all Islamists. Now, the thing of this, Bashar Assad is not a religious Muslim. He is a secular Muslim. In fact, Christians have done pretty well under Assad in spite of his brutality.
Well, in fact, that's one of the things that struck me here, Sandy, and why I think it's a mistake for us to get involved with the rebels. Assad's a bad guy. Nobody would question that. But then you all have to ask the question, what's the alternative? If he's removed, like you brought up earlier, what's going to replace him? And I know that the Christian community in Syria at least had some level of protection from Assad. They will have none if these rebel groups take over. Last question, Sandy, just 30 seconds. What about the Israeli people themselves? How do they feel about the American people and the American nation?
We are so closely joined at the hip in terms of bloodline and immigration that there's a great love and a mutual admiration, and they recognize that we are their friends. The American people are their friends. And one last thing, Brian, I just want to tie the knot on what I was saying. My point about Syria and the Soviets and Islam is that the president is caught between two loyalties. And I think that's why he can't be decisive. He must decide between his romance for the Soviets, and he's shown that in his policies toward Russia, and his romance for the Islamists. And that's why his hands are confused. Yeah,
that's like Elijah saying, how long will you limp along on two opinions? All right, Sandy, thanks for taking time to be with us. God bless you. Listen to you tomorrow.
You're welcome. Thanks, Brian. Bye-bye.
Back in 2.